present, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, Alderman, the Mayor, Alderman Doug Chipman.
Thank you everyone and good evening. It's nice to see so much interest in a council meeting tonight. To open proceedings, I'd invite our General Manager to recite the council prayer. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Mayor. Almighty God, we humbly beseech Thee to vouchsafe Thy blessing upon this council. Direct and prosper its deliberations to the advancement of Thy glory and true welfare of the people of the City of Clarence. Amen.
Amen. And I do acknowledge the Tasmanian Aboriginal community as the traditional custodians of the land that we're meeting on tonight, and pay our respects to elders past and present. And I'd also like to remind everyone the meeting is being recorded audio-visually and will be available on Council's website later this week. Thank you. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies, and I note we have none. Item 2, confirmation of the minutes for the special council meeting held on the 25th of September and the council meeting held on the 30th of September circulated, to be taken as read and confirmed. Moved Alderman Chong, seconded Alderman Kennedy. No questions? All those in favour? Carried unanimously.
Excuse me, Mr Mayor, it wasn't because I wasn't present. And
Oh,
so
okay.
I abstained.
I'll put them, all those in favour?
Mr Mayor, I have a question as well.
Okay, well let's go back. Alderman Blomley, your question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I note that on pages 47 and 48, the last council meeting held on the 30th of September, agenda item 12.5, that questions asked without notice have Aldermen Mulder, Kennedy, Walker and Warren recorded as asking questions. However, there are also questions raised by Alderman James and myself that have not been recorded. May I suggest it would, in my view, be best practice from a corporate governance perspective that all questions asked without notice by Aldermen, including the answers, are recorded in the minutes. Is it possible for this approach to be adopted going forward?
Certainly, it's Alderman Blomley, and we'll make sure it happens.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
So I'll put the motion again that the minutes for the special council meeting and the council meeting as circulated be taken as read and confirmed. Alderman Chong, seconded Alderman Kennedy. All those in favour? Against? Motion's carried. Thank you. Mayor's communication at item 3. I'd like to report a couple of things. Firstly, on the 1st of October, along with 9 other aldermen, we hosted the State Government Joint Regional Council Cabinet meeting, and I also attended the Greater Hobart Mayor's Forum that afternoon as well. And then on the 3rd of October, of course, along with the other Greater Hobart Mayors, Minister Alan Tudge, who's the Federal Minister of Population, Cities and Urban Infrastructure, and Minister Ferguson, State Minister for Growth, Infrastructure and Transport, we launched the Greater Hobart Deal Implementation Plan. Copies of that have been circulated to all concerned, and this council hosted the luncheon after that. There are a few other items which I'll include in the list for the minutes, but I'd like to draw attention that on the 4th of October, along with the GM, I attended the CERTA AGM. Mayor Kerry Vincent from Sorell was re-elected as President, and Mayor Debbie Wisby was elected as Vice President. Rugby Neighbourhood Centre 40th birthday celebrations are on the 12th of October. And then on the 14th, the GM and I accepted an invitation to attend as observers an STCA workshop looking at strategic priorities, and that was worthwhile. And then on the 18th of October, I met with Bill Lawson to follow up on his workshop to Council concerning us adopting a reconciliation action plan, and I believe he's going to write to us with options and costings for the 4 different options there. So I'll table those for minutes. Item 4, Council notes the workshops conducted on the 7th and 14th of October and the agenda briefing on the 18th. Thank you. Alderman James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I refer to the...
Can I take a mover and a seconder
yes,
first? Sorry.
thanks.
Alderman Pearce moved it. Alderman Edmonds seconded it. Thanks. Alderman James.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, I refer Council to the Council meeting on the 17th of June 2019 with respect to the cliff top risk assessment. Can I advise the Council and others that a motion that I moved and was seconded and subsequently lost is that there may be a delay before the consultant completes the development of a City of Clarence top risk assessment plan. Council considers as a matter of urgency the installation of temporary fencing in the open area on the cliff face at the rear of the Cenotaph at Anzac Park, Lindisfarne. The motion was lost, Mr Mayor. There were 4 in favour of the motion that we should proceed along that course. Alderman Edmonds, Alderman James, Alderman Moulder, Alderman Pearce. Those against were present and voted against it. Mr Mayor, it has now come to fruition, and I think in hindsight it would have been better if we had have actually initiated some temporary fencing at the time. For the record, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman James. Are there any other questions concerning the weekly briefing reports? In that case, Council notes the workshops conducted on the 7th and 14th of October and the agenda brief on the 18th. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Item 5, declarations of interest of Alderman, close associate. Alderman Blomley.
Mr Mayor, I rise to declare interest in 2 items this evening. First agenda item 11.3.2, second agenda item being 11.7.4.
Thank you. Other Alderman Newington.
Agenda item 11.3.1.
Yes.
Okay.
On reflection and out of an abundance of caution, item 9.1.
Okay. Any other declarations in that case? Moving on to item 6, tabling of petitions. General Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. We received one petition of 363 signatories, which was assessed as not being valid. But in the circumstances, my recommendation to Council is that officers proceed to provide a report in respect to that subject matter, and then to provide that to Council at a later date.
Thank you. Any from the floor? Alderman Blomley? I was going to ask if there are any other petitions from the floor, or any other additions to petitions. There being not. It's just a matter of tabling, so there's no need for motion. Item 7, public question time. For items 7.1 to 7.3, 7.2 there's no business there. Then 7.3, General Manager. Answers questions previously taken on notice.
Thank you, Mayor. We took a number of questions on notice at the last meeting, and those are documented in the agenda with the answer. If it's acceptable to Council, I propose to just take those as read.
Thank you. Moving on to 7.4 then, questions without notice. Any members of the public like to ask questions without notice? Please come forward to the microphone. Could just identify yourself and your address before asking a question, please.
I'm Denise Hoggan from Balaka Street, Rosny, and my question concerns 12A Akuna Street, Rosny, for which submissions have recently closed. My question is, has Clarence Council entered into or begun negotiations concerning any lease or pre-lease agreement related to 12A Akuna Street, Montague Bay, with any individual or business entity? And what is the legal significance of the proposed lease area drawing number 1421 DA04 Revision C WIP, dated the 9th of May 2019, which was cited in Appendix B of the Fraser Reid Planning Report for that development. The document did not appear to be part of the DA documents that were accessible to the public.
Okay, thank you. Well, General Manager, are you in a position to answer that at the moment?
Certainly, Mayor. In respect to the first question, the answer is that Council has not entered into any negotiation regarding terms of lease for the Rosny Hill Reserve site. And in respect to question 2, I'll take that one on notice.
Okay,
Thank you.
I've typed it out.
Oh, thank you. You're very helpful.
Other questions without notice?
Meeting, I asked a question.
Could you identify yourself, please, and address?
Well, everybody knows Mr. Figg because I was announced, and I'm at Lauderdale.
Thank you.
In the agenda, we've got an answer to a question that I raised, and the Mayor took the question on notice, which is the answers in the agenda. He also stated, which isn't in the minutes or the agenda, that I think there are legal implications in the question and I need to take advice on answering the question. Could the Mayor please notify me and the rest of us what the legal implications are of that question in writing, please? And secondly, your answer states that we can defend our land in relation to the planning scheme. Now, the planning scheme states, if we're talking about that I've just shown you, which is Clarence, the people up the back, everything in red there.
You're addressing the council, Mr. Figg. If you could please ask the question.
So what the aldermen have got in front of them is this document, and it shows in red or magenta or whatever colour you want to pick the areas that are put aside by the government, which the council has to adopt for the LPS, areas that will be designated to be inundated, eroded.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Where is the question?
Well, if you'd wait, I'd ask it, Madam.
Mr. Figg.
The question is, Mr. Mayor, the planning scheme goes against your answer. It says that we're not allowed to landfill. It says that we've got to avoid barriers, so that's part of the defence on inundation. It also says that you've got to ensure coastal processes of erosion.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Where is the
Figg,
question?
could you just be quiet for a moment, please?
Yes,
Look,
certainly.
these are very important issues. I'd
They
like
are.
to take them up, but this is not the proper occasion to give due weight, and I'm quite happy to do it in the full public domain. But if you've got a question on notice,
I have a
or
question
without
on notice, which I'm trying to ask. And
well, please do.
We have been, oh, thank you, I appreciate that opportunity. Ensure coastal processes of erosion can continue. Once our land is covered by the
Mr.
sea...
Figg, look, I'm going to have to rule you out of order. Ask the question or make another arrangement to make a presentation to council, which we are quite willing to entertain.
Well, that's strange. I tried to make an appointment with the General Manager and it was refused.
Well, we'll fix that.
Thank you. So the question is, if our land is lost to the Crown when it's overrun by the sea, can you please say yes or no to the original question? Can we defend our land against climate change, erosion, inundation and everything that affects us, the owner of the land?
Thank you. We'll amplify the question we've previously given you, the answer we've previously given you. Any other questions from members of the public? Thank you. General Manager, next is item 8, deputations by members of the public.
Thank you, Mayor. We have one deputation tonight from Miss Danielle Newstead in respect to Lincoln Street in Lindisfarne. Is Danielle here?
As you're coming forward, if I could just remind everyone coming forward, we've got a 3-minute window under meeting regs, and there'll be an alert at 2.5 minutes to give you a chance to wind up.
I'm Danielle Newstead, business owner of Dee's Village News and Lotto, Lincoln Street, Lindisfarne. As you're aware from the motions of notice, I'm petitioning to have a legal pedestrian crossing with solar-powered flashing lights established in Lincoln Street connecting my news agency and the Eastern Shore Medical Centre located opposite. So far, the petition has acquired the support of over 400 concerned residents and customers and has ongoing support. We've been operating for 8 months, and during that time, on nearly a daily basis, we witness significant confusion and disturbing hazardous incidents and near misses due to motorists and pedestrians not knowing whether traffic is to give way to pedestrians or not. Since the last evaluation was undertaken in relation to traffic in the village, the volume of pedestrians and motorists has increased tremendously. The present pedestrian refuge is insufficient. It's not wide enough to allow safety for pedestrians pushing wheelchairs, prams or utilising motorised chairs. Either the carer or the assisted person are encroaching onto the road into oncoming traffic. Lindisfarne, as you are aware, has a demographic of predominantly aged and retired residents, contains several aged care facilities. Currently, there is no pedestrian crossing on any roads in any around or surrounding areas around Lindisfarne Village. Whilst there are hot spots in these areas, excuse me, it appears that the vehicles and heavy-duty utilities frequenting Lincoln Street do so with higher speeds than on the surrounding streets and in excess of any speed limit signage in place. The speed limit is 40 k's an hour. Tas Police have made lucrative revenue when they randomly set up speed radar spots, and a conversation with police on one particular day revealed that out of all the motorists booked for exceeding 40 k's an hour, the lowest reading was 58. The aged residents do not have the agility to cross swiftly. They do not have the sight or the hearing required to judge the distance accurately for oncoming traffic, and quite often, after leaving the medical centre across the road, are unwell, which amplifies their current deficits. My background is varied, from a paralegal to conference management, and up until I opened the news agency, for 15 years I was a youth worker. Being a youth worker, I constantly went into battle every day, a little bit more, with youths engaging in high-risk behaviour. These pedestrians are engaging in high-risk behaviour not by choice, the youths were. And while I was at work, I witnessed and attended a fatality, and I don't want to experience it again. And these preventative measures can be established to prevent all this. Everyone in this room has a mother, a father, a grandmother, a grandfather. Wouldn't you want something in place to prevent them getting knocked down? And more often than not, it's going to end in a fatality. Be proactive, not reactive.
Moving on to item 9, motions on notice. 9.1, Alderman Blomley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
And thank you, Alderman Walker.
Mr Mayor, I move the motion standing in my name.
Have a second, please. Thank you, Alderman Pearce.
Mr Mayor, as colleagues will recall, and as contained within our agenda papers this evening, at our last meeting on the 30th of September, I asked a question without notice regarding pedestrian safety in Lincoln Street, Lindisfarne. I note the response from council officers at page 318 of our agenda papers, and I thank them for this. A few moments ago, we heard, or had the benefit of hearing firsthand from Ms Danielle Newstead, the owner of Dee's News and Lotto in Lindisfarne, of the issues associated with pedestrian safety in Lindisfarne Village. Ms Newstead has been the driving force behind improvements to pedestrian safety in Lindisfarne, and I would like to take this opportunity to place on the record my thanks to her for all her work in this regard. As we've heard, Ms Newstead initiated a community petition. Whilst in the strictest of terms, as we heard earlier tonight, this may not be a conforming petition, it does nonetheless clearly illustrate the heightened community concern surrounding the danger posed to pedestrians, mainly our elderly residents, attempting to cross Lincoln Street. And I have, Mr Mayor, to add to the petition that was tabled earlier tonight, an additional 40 or so signatures that I table now, with your leave. Mr Mayor, whilst I appreciate most, if not all, colleagues have either an understanding of the area in question or have taken the time to visit Ms Newstead to discuss this issue, for the benefit of clarity, the area in question is the section of Lincoln Street between the Eastern Shore Medical Centre and Ms Newstead's business. Mr Mayor, the common theme flowing through feedback from residents is that the current traffic island is simply not fit for purpose, as it fails to provide adequate safety, particularly for those who motorise mobility scooters and wheelchairs and those pushing prams. As a potential solution, the overwhelming feedback from the signatories of the petition that we heard earlier tonight has been the installation of a zebra crossing together with solar-powered flashing lights, as it is viewed that this would appropriately alleviate the current danger. And that is why, without wishing to preempt the officer's report and their recommendations, this has been included as Part C of my motion, so that this potential solution is fully examined with the findings to be presented to Aldermen at a workshop for our consideration. Mr Mayor, as you all know, Section 20 of the Act clearly outlines our functions, specifically to provide for the health, safety and welfare of the community and to represent and promote the interests of the community. Thirdly, to provide for the peace, order and good government of the municipal area. Mr Mayor, on all three counts, this motion demonstrably, I submit, hits the mark. We are here to listen to our community. We are here to act in the best interests of our community, and we're here to ensure the safety of our community. Mr Mayor, I commend the motion and seek the support of colleagues.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to follow on from Alderman Womwin. I thought that speech summed it up. But look, he's quite right. The traffic island there is not suitable. It's certainly not wide enough. I saw a person pushing a wheelchair through there, and there's just that much. There's not enough room. It needs to be bigger. But also, Mayor, as Daniel Newstead said, the traffic just whizzes down there. They don't slow down to 40. That's one of the things that I'm really concerned about. Now, I saw an elderly gentleman there Friday, and there was no cars coming, but because I was going to go out and help him, because he was obviously confused on the crossing itself. Because, as was said earlier, a lot of people, cars will stop, and other times cars will not stop. So people are confused. Do they walk across? Do they stop? Or do they give way to cars? I really think this needs to be clarified, Mayor, and for safety issues. It is an elderly area. There's no risk on that, and people are walking across that road exceptionally slowly because it's an older area. And we've got the activity centre there where a lot of people come from various homes and walk there. And I am just really concerned that someone will get hit there. And look, I just think we can do something, and as was said earlier, let's be proactive, not reactive.
Thank you. Other speakers?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's interesting that this matter has arisen at this time, and may I say from the outset that the previous owner of the agency, TATS agency, brought this to the attention of a number of members of this council in the past, and also to the question in relation to what Transport Tasmania can do in relation to this falls right into their area of responsibility. Oh, Transport Commission, thank you, Alderman Bomberto. So look, the point about the police being involved with supervising the speed limit through that particular street is one thing, and they are the agency or departmental people that are responsible for that. Secondly, with regard to the zebra crossing and flashing lights, there is, I believe, a problem with that, and that is that the Transport Commission have in the past, and I stand corrected on this, are very reluctant to implement zebra crossings or flashing lights on any of not only their roads, their highways, but also to give approval to council on their roads. So look, we have a difficulty here in as much as that even though I believe it's appropriate to take on board people's concerns about this matter, I think that what it boils down to, and basically council's responsibility in relation to this, is minimal, because as I mentioned a moment ago, Mr Mayor, the fact of the matter is that council does not have control over the implementation or installation of zebra crossings or in fact flashing lights as a potential solution to this matter. There has been we won't call it a petition, there has been a note of interest from 380 people thereabouts requesting something to be done, but I am just advising or trying to say that it's not an easy task, and the question that arises here in my view is that, okay, let's let it go forward, but I think that we can expect from the Transport Commission to say that they will not implement zebra crossings, nor will they implement flashing lights, and also too they will probably write back to the council and say that at council's monthly meeting with other agencies, including the police, that there be stronger and more prevalence of the police to monitor this particular matter. And if that is the case, then really it may solve a number of problems. In conclusion, Mr Mayor, may I say that when we did large or project works in relation to the Lincoln Street streetscape and then Franklin Street as well, a lot of those works were done to the standards of the day. In other words, that pedestrian refuge in Lincoln Street was done in accordance with the standards that apply to the Department of Transport, the Transport Commission. So look, okay, let it go forward, but don't be surprised when we get an answer back that really it's a case of the police taking on board and being there in a monitoring situation and basically being there on more regular occasions. But for the installation of zebra crossings and flashing lights, I don't think that is the answer, and I don't think it would be agreed to by the appropriate agency.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'd like to ask a question either to the General Manager or to Mr Grierson. Could we have clarification in relation to Council's powers as compared to the Transport Commission's? I'd be very interested to know that.
Yes, I'll try and answer that as best I can. I think in more recent times the Department of State Growth has taken a step back a bit from being so prescriptive about what happens on our local roads. So it's still the Transport Commission has the power, and indeed you have to approach them for approval for anything you propose. But what their attitude is to zebra crossings, in the past they have been, they've resisted them on the basis that while you might be legally in the right when you cross a zebra crossing, you can be legally in the right, but if you're hit by a vehicle, that doesn't really help you. So they've been generally not supportive of them, but whether that's still the case now, I'm not sure. So I think, without preempting the report that will come back to council in the workshop, I think we'll engage specialist traffic engineers to give us advice on this, so we get the best advice, and we'll report back to council on options, because there's more than one way to do this, and one of the options we'll ask them to report on is the one put forward in the notice of motion. But things like wombat crossings, you see them quite commonly used these days, so it's a combination speed hump zebra crossing, so it forces vehicles to slow down. That they've certainly been installed recently in Hobart, I think around Hill Street Park. So that would be probably another option, but there may be others.
Thank you. Other speakers? Alderman Mulder?
Yes, I think they are cautionary words about coming here with a solution in mind. the publication concerned is actually the Australian is an Australian roads publication called Guide to Road Safety, which has a very interesting chapter on pedestrian crossings. In there, there is no reference to what were formerly known as zebra crossings. And in fact, if you look around, we haven't had zebra crossings except on private property, such as Eastlands Car Park, and I was out at Cambridge today and there was one there, but they're on private property. Because there are issues with pedestrian crossings, and that is that I think they've come to the conclusion, rightly or wrongly, that the zebra crossings are a danger because people just assume that they will have the right of way and assume that motorists are always going to stop. And of course, there's far too many cases where that doesn't happen. But that's not to say that there can't be other things looked at. There is also the possibility, of course, of traffic calming measures, which is virtually putting a chicane through that area by putting protrusions, which severely restricts the flow of traffic. You may even get to a situation where an analysis of the traffic pattern shows that it might be possible to actually have that section there where so many people cross actually declared, to be actually blocked off from traffic so that traffic can be detoured around it. But I'm not going to go here and empt it, but I do note the concern. It's a concern shared by many other areas, particularly when there are shopping precincts and villages that arose long before we had motor cars, simply not designed to take cars and take traffic, and therefore you have to come up with other solutions. But once again, I commend concerned members of the public for bringing the case before, and I'm sure that the officers will do their absolute best within the Australian Guide to Road Safety to find some way of trying to make this safer. The answer is not sending more policemen there. I can tell you from my past experience, we do not, Tasmania cannot afford enough policemen to stand and monitor the traffic at every spot where there is continual conflict. So we need to do it through road safety, through design, I think is a better way, and I look forward to some of the solutions that might come forward.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I thank colleagues for their contributions this evening and also Mr Grierson's response to Alderman Bomberto's question. The interesting thing here is, Mr Mayor, that people, not regular patrons of Miss Newset's business, but people local to the area heard of this petition and made their way in there to sign it. Such is the community interest in ensuring this issue is appropriately addressed. Now, we're not we're not proposing all the answers here tonight. There's one in Part C that's something that was suggested by members of the community, and that will be canvassed in the officers' report. We will have our officers come here, having engaged the experts, to provide us with that expert advice. Based on expert advice, we will then ensure that the best possible solution is provided. And that's the important thing here. And may I also just say too, if the concern is what other tiers of government may or may not do, we've seen the power of local residents in providing these 400 plus signatures that we tabled here this evening. And woe behold a state government, dare I suggest, Mr Mayor, that does not take seriously the views of this community or indeed this council. I commend the motion.
Thank you. So the motion is as tabled by Alderman Blomley. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried unanimously. If we could recall Alderman Walker, please.
He's watching it.
On point 2 is notice of motion, Alderman Warren, in regard to climate change emergency. Alderman Warren. Do we have a seconder, please? Alderman Kennedy, thank you. Alderman Warren.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to start by talking about the difference between urgent action and declaring an emergency, because language is important. In the last few years, we've all seen too many examples of natural disasters such as storms, floods and bushfires that have had a catastrophic consequence for life and property. I watched the 2011 Queensland floods on TV from not too far across the border in New South Wales. When something like that happens, first of all, there's a call for urgent action, but it's when the government steps in and declares a state of emergency that you know it's serious, that the forces are going to be mobilised and that action will be taken. That's why I'm calling for Clarence to declare a climate emergency. It's about recognising and naming up the problem so that we can begin to deal with it. Business as usual is not going to cut it any more than it would have done in those floods. When people in the community approach me about their concerns about climate change, which I share, and when I see hundreds of thousands of Australians, including upwards of 15,000 Tasmanians, turning out for rallies begging our governments to take meaningful action on climate change, it's time to do what I can within my level of influence. And what we can do at the local government level is to ask the state and federal governments to recognise that we are in a state of emergency and to take action. The federal government's own report shows that our carbon emissions are increasing and we're not going to meet the Paris Agreement. We have a very small window to turn this around, or we're going to have a lot more to worry about than the cost of our electricity bills. Those who do not believe we're in a state of emergency will tell you that the science is not settled. The science is settled. 97% of climate scientists agree. Other countries, particularly in Europe, including a Conservative UK government, accept this and are taking action. The naysayers will tell you that our emissions are decreasing. They're not. Because Australia's population is increasing, this means that our emissions per capita, as in per person, are decreasing. But this is meaningless when our total emissions are increasing. People will say that China is a big polluter and there's no point us doing anything until they do. 30 of the countries that contribute less than 2% of the world's emissions, if put together, would have the same emissions as China. So together we could make as big an impact as China acting. Also, is it fair that those nations who were first to industrialise and thus make the mess don't take steps to clean up? Opposers to this motion will also tell you that we're scaring the children. What's scaring the children is that we're heading towards an unprecedented global catastrophe and the grown-ups are asleep at the wheel. That's enough to give anyone nightmares. Yes. I've even heard someone claim extreme weather events, as predicted by climate science modelling as far back as the 1970s, are not increasing. The evidence clearly shows that catastrophic bushfires, flooding and storms have increased significantly right here in Clarence. We've seen the destruction with our own eyes. And finally, those who oppose this motion will call it virtue signalling. I'd like to know when being virtuous became a form of insult. But just in case there's any doubt, I'm not bringing this motion just to be seen to be doing something. I'm bringing this motion because it's the right thing to do. When our children and our children's children look back in years to come and say, you knew this was happening, why didn't you do anything? I want to be able to say, I tried.
Yes. This is a democratically elected chamber and we've got to respect the rights of everyone to be able to put their views fearlessly in without favour. It is absolutely inappropriate for the public to be engaging or demonstrating in that capacity. So I would ask you politely, please, to respect the dignity of the chamber and allow people to present their views without fear or favour. Thank you. Look, it goes for all members of the public, Mr Figg, as you're well aware, and if it was a parliament at the state or federal level, you'd find it be far more difficult to interrupt. And I might also point out it is an offence under the Act to disrupt the council meeting. Thank you. Alderman Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Alderman Warren. I don't think there's a lot more that I can add to that very well-informed research and most considered comments. But a year ago I made the decision to seek council election. My reason for standing was to provide representation for our beachside communities in particular. For the permanent residents of our coastal communities and those that are on and in the water on a regular basis, residents of all ages and stages in life, climate change was at the top of their list of real concerns at that time, as it is right now throughout our city. I listened to those concerns then and I'm listening to them now, and I'm asking you to do the same. Surely this is our job to listen. We owe it not only to our residents, but our future generations. As one of our aldermen said a little earlier, we're here to listen to our community. Thank you.
Alderman Jones.
Yes, I was waiting, Mr Mayor, for someone else to jump to their feet. And can I say and commend Alderman Warren for her motion, and I think it hits the nail on the head, and quite frankly, it goes right to the cusp, in fact, of where this council ought to be heading and also in what it ought to be doing. Can I just take a step back and say that this motion, if it's carried, and hopefully it should be carried unanimously, Mr Mayor. If it's carried unanimously, then it's sending a signal to the Clarence community and also the Greater Hobart area that Clarence is prepared to stand up and let it be known that it's prepared to have its voice in relation to this most pressing and most important issue. As I was thinking over the motion today, I thought about the young people in the city of Clarence who are under 18, who cannot vote. But by the very nature of a teenager being able to capture the world's attention in relation to this, I believe it's going to go right to the critical point in relation to the young people within the city of Clarence who don't necessarily have a voice through the ballot box or by writing to the Prime Minister or to the state government, although they can and should do that. But by this council representing not only our middle and senior people within the city, but more importantly those persons under the age of 18, and we can go back to whatever age you want to consider, who have an understanding through their teachings, through their access to the internet, to be able to witness a lot of these difficulties that is basically challenging not only the Clarence community but the worldwide community in relation to what should be done and what should happen in relation to taking measures to address climate change. If at any point, as a result of this decision tonight, if it's able to demonstrate and it's going to indicate to the younger people of the city of Clarence, and also that may be identified by the Greater Hobart area, then it may start a process by which the state and federal governments can no longer sit back and basically say that they have the appropriate measures in place. And they don't have it. And the scientists have come out, and if we don't listen to the experts, then surely there's something wrong. And I believe, Mr Mayor, that the younger people have a notion, have an understanding in relation to what is going to impact upon the environment and in relation to climate change. And I know for a fact there are many mums and dads and grandmothers and grandfathers who are really concerned about what the future holds for the younger people. I seek council support.
Alderman Pearce.
Thank you, Mayor. And I thank Alderman Warren for moving this motion. And one of the things I have received, like Alderman, is a lot of emails. And I especially thank the residents that sent me emails with links and comments on them. It's fine to get all emails say just support this, but I do appreciate the ones that did send links, and it was on both sides too. It was on climate change and other areas that were very interesting to read as well. But I do support this motion. But also I'd like to comment too that Alderman von Verto has moved some very good points with an alternative motion, which I would have liked to have seen some of those incorporated, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen.
Point of order, Mr Mayor, it's not an alternative motion.
No, it's amendments, wasn't it? Yeah. And some of those would have been, I think, would have been quite good in the motion itself. But look, I do support this. I think council are trying to do what we can at the moment. To have that bit more influence, though, I think is extremely good. And I think, you know, I've been listening to people like Alderman Kennedy said, and I think they totally agree with council going down this line. So I think anything we can do to add our voice to this, I think it certainly needs supporting.
Other speakers. Alderman Newington.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. First of all, I just want to say, I think, you know, no one's going to disagree that we all want the same things, and we all want to protect the environment and look after the future of the planet and everyone on it. I don't think that's something that we need to argue about. But I have major concerns about, you know, what does a climate emergency actually mean? How do we know it's over? What's going to be next? A climate catastrophe? And even Alderman Warren mentioned that in her talk. I mean, the whole debate is not helped by those claiming moral superiority about anyone who disagrees with the agreed dogma and the agreed agenda, and I think that doesn't help us come up with good decision making. And look, to be honest, I mean, me and plenty of the people that have spoken to me about this issue, to be honest, are a bit over the whole debate and the all-consuming and negative approach that we seem to hear in the media with catastrophe, and, you know, it's just, you know, I've had enough of it personally. I believe the approach is adaptation through technology, and some of the technology that may help us solve some of these problems is not available yet. And I think sometimes we're picking winners before we've had a chance to really assess, certainly have a look at the cost benefit of some of these things. You know, plenty of the predictions haven't proven true, and I mean, some of the, you know, they haven't. I mean, some of the things, you know, we're going to be in an ice age in the 70s. We're going to have, you know, sea levels are going to rise by metres. You know, there's not more fires and more stuff. There's a lot of evidence out there. Yeah, thank you.
Mr Mayor, I'm sorry to interrupt here, but I'm having difficulty hearing Alderman Newington from the talk coming from the gallery here. Can you just reiterate your earlier comments, please, because it is quite rude. Alderman Newington isn't afforded the same level of respect that the previous speakers were.
I mean, I would ask the public to respect that again.
Thank you. You know, I mean, just because we're told there's more fires and it's all caused by climate change and it's all droughts are all caused by climate change, doesn't make it true. All right, there is some debate out there that hasn't been proven, and I mean, I for one don't just believe things blindly. I know it's worth looking at, but I mean, it's not as clear cut as people make out. And to be honest, to now be using kids to scare us with end of earth scenarios to get more action, in my opinion, is a form of child abuse, and I think it should be condemned. That's over the top. I mean, look, it's more like a doomsday cult than a scientific debate at times, you know, and I think that doesn't help the whole situation.
Mr Mayor, this really is beyond the pale.
Oh, no.
It's no, excuse me, other people have been afforded a level of decency and respect. The same ought to be afforded to Alderman Newington and every other elected member
on a
in
point
this
of order,
chamber.
Mr Mayor, I haven't heard any comments from the gallery, and
I can.
direct.
There's a point of order before the chair.
Mr Mayor,
I reiterate again that it is an offence to disrupt a council meeting. If it continues, then I'm going to have to take steps to have people removed from the public gallery. Now, I'm sure nobody wants that. Can you please respect everyone's right to have a view on this? If you haven't heard their view before, it's a good opportunity to hear it. Let's have that debate. Let's hear the different views in an open, respectful and honest way. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor. I mean, unfortunately, I suppose it's proving my point to a certain extent, isn't it? Look, personally, I believe we are doing enough. I mean, if you think about the things that are going on in state, federal and local government, I mean, you know, we've got commitments to the Paris